The Galactic Defense Council chamber buzzed with the usual mix of clicks, chirps, and synthesized translations as representatives from 47 species gathered for the emergency session. Admiral Zephyra of the Crystalline Hegemony tapped her talons against the obsidian podium, her diamond-like exoskeleton catching the artificial starlight streaming through the dome above. "The Void Swarm has consumed 3 more systems," she announced, her voice carrying the weight of impending doom. Kepler 442, Ross 128, and now Wolf 359. 17 billion souls lost in the past month alone. A collective shudder ran through the assembly. The Void Swarm had appeared from the dark space between galaxies 6 months ago, an endless tide of biomechanical horrors that consumed everything in their path. Traditional weapons barely scratched their adaptive hulls, and their numbers seemed infinite. Our combined fleets have achieved a mere 12% casualty rate against them, continued General Korath of the Reptilian Empire, his scaled hide bearing fresh scars from the latest engagement. They adapt to our plasma cannons within minutes. Our quantum torpedoes prove ineffective after the first volley, and their regenerative capabilities make sustained damage nearly impossible. Ambassador THYSS of the Ethereal Collective floated forward, her translucent form shimmering with concern. The Hive Queens are already beginning to spawn secondary broods. If we cannot stop this initial wave, we face extinction within the year. That's when the human delegation requested to speak. The chamber fell silent as Ambassador Sarah Chun stepped forward, her unremarkable bipedal form drawing skeptical glances from beings who had mastered space travel when humanity was still discovering fire. The humans had joined the Galactic Defense Council only 50 years ago, contributing little more than raw materials and basic manufacturing to the war effort. Earth proposes to contribute a prototype vessel to the defense effort, Chun said simply. The silence stretched uncomfortably before Admiral Zephyr spoke. Ambassador Chun, with respect, human technology is approximately 700 years behind current galactic standards. Your species lacks energy shielding, faster-than-light weaponry, or even basic quantum computing. What could you possibly offer? Chen's expression remained neutral. Permission to demonstrate, Admiral. Behind her, the holographic display activated, showing technical specifications that made several representatives twitter with amusement. The vessel appeared laughably primitive, a blocky, angular design lacking the elegant curves of modern starships. Its hull was composed of simple titanium steel alloys rather than adaptive nanomaterials. Most amusing of all, it relied on chemical propulsion systems and kinetic weapons. This is what you propose to send against creatures that have defeated our most advanced dreadnoughts, scoffed Captain Vex of the Machine Collective, his cybernetic implants whirring with derision. Your prototype lacks even basic energy weapons. The Terran Defense Initiative designation TDI 001 carries a crew of 12, Chen continued, ignoring the ripple of laughter. It's powered by a fusion reactor generating approximately 2.3 terawatts, armed with magnetic acceleration cannons, and carries a payload of what we call guided kinetic penetrators. More laughter echoed through the chamber. Admiral Zephyra raised a talon for silence, though her own crystal formations sparkled with barely contained amusement. Ambassador, the Void Swarm's smallest drones are 3 kilometers in length with adaptive armor that has withstood concentrated fire from our entire 4th Fleet. Your kinetic weapons would be like throwing pebbles at a mountain. Perhaps, Chen replied, but we've observed something your fleets may have missed. The Void Swarm's adaptation protocols focus on energy-based threats. They've never encountered purely kinetic attacks delivered at the velocities our magnetic systems can achieve. General Korath leaned forward, his interest piqued despite his skepticism. What velocities? Approximately 15% of light speed for our standard rounds. Our prototype carries specialized ammunition that we've been developing based on our analysis of your engagement recordings. The chamber erupted in debates conducted in dozens of languages. 15% of light speed was impressive for kinetic weapons, but still primitive compared to their energy arsenals. The idea that humanity's Stone Age approach could succeed where their advanced technology had failed seemed absurd. Ambassador THYSS drifted closer to the human delegation. You understand that deploying your vessel would likely result in its complete destruction? The Void Swarm shows no mercy. Chen nodded solemnly. Captain Rodriguez and her crew are volunteers. They understand the risks. After nearly an hour of heated discussion, Admiral Zephyra called for order. Very well. The Council grants permission for Earth Prototype to join the defensive line at the Tau Ceti system. However, we cannot spare escort vessels for what amounts to a symbolic gesture. None requested, Admiral, Chen replied. TDI-001 operates best alone. As the session concluded and representatives filed out, few paid attention to the human delegation. Most considered it a waste of time, a desperate species throwing away lives in a futile gesture. They had no way of knowing that humanity's greatest strength lay not in their technology, but in their ability to think differently about impossible problems. The prototype was already en route, carrying weapons that would soon redefine the concept of warfare itself. Captain Maria Rodriguez watched the tactical display with the calm focus that had earned her command of humanity's most ambitious military project. The TDI-001, nicknamed Sledgehammer by its crew, drifted silently through space 3 astronomical units from the Tau Ceti system, where the largest Void Swarm formation yet encountered was massing for another assault. Passive sensors are picking up the alien fleet positions, reported Lieutenant Shun from the navigation station. Looks like they've positioned themselves in a classic defensive sphere around the 4th planet. Standard Council doctrine. Rodriguez nodded, studying the formation. 47 capital ships from various species, their exotic energy signatures creating a beautiful but futile light show against the darkness. She'd studied every engagement recording from the past 6 months, watched as similar formations were systematically dismantled by the Void Swarm's terrifying efficiency. Any sign of our targets? She asked. Long-range sensors detect gravitational anomalies at the edge of the system, replied Dr. Patel from the science station. Mass displacement suggests approximately 200 Void Swarm vessels, including what appears to be a Queen-class bioship. They're maintaining position just outside effective weapons range. The bridge fell silent as everyone contemplated those numbers. 200 ships, each one capable of single-handedly destroying a planet's defenses. The largest recorded Void Swarm formation had contained only 60 vessels, and it had wiped out an entire star system. Communications from the alien fleet, announced Ensign Kim. Admiral Zephyra is requesting our position and tactical assessment. Rodriguez considered her response carefully. The Galactic Defense Council had made it clear that Earth's prototype was expected to integrate with their defensive formation, adding its insignificant firepower to their doomed last stand. But humanity hadn't survived ice ages, world wars, and the colonization of space by following conventional wisdom. Inform the Admiral that we're proceeding with independent operations, she said finally. We'll maintain communication, but operate outside their command structure. The communications officer's face showed surprise, but she transmitted the message. Within minutes, Admiral Zephyr's response crackled through the speakers, her translated voice sharp with irritation. Captain Rodriguez, your vessel lacks the defensive capabilities to engage independently. You will integrate with our formation immediately or withdraw from the system. With respect, Admiral TDI-001 was designed for independent operation. We'll engage the enemy on our own terms. The response was a long stream of what the translation system politely rendered as untranslatable expression of extreme disapproval. Dr. Patel looked up from his console. Captain, I'm detecting movement from the Void Swarm. They're beginning their approach vector. Estimated time to contact with the defensive fleet is 47 minutes. Rodriguez activated the ship-wide communication system. All hands, this is the captain. We've trained for this moment for 3 years. Remember, we're not just representing Earth today. We're proving that sometimes the the simplest solutions are the most effective. Prepare for combat operations. The sledgehammer had been built around a single revolutionary concept. Instead of trying to match alien technology, humanity would leverage what they did best. The ship's hull contained no exotic materials, no quantum computers, no energy shields. Instead, every system had been designed for maximum reliability and efficiency. The magnetic acceleration system that ran the length of the ship could launch projectiles at incredible velocities using principles humans had understood for centuries. The targeting computers relied on basic physics calculations that had guided artillery shells and guided missiles for generations. Most importantly, the ammunition had been designed by minds that understood warfare not as an elegant dance of energy and shields, but as a brutal contest of who could deliver the most force to the most vulnerable points. Weapons status? Rodriguez asked. All magnetic cannons charged and ready, reported Chief Gunner Martinez. We have full loads of standard kinetic penetrators, plus the special packages Dr. Yamamoto designed. Targeting systems are operating within normal parameters. Rodriguez nodded. Dr. Yamamoto's special packages were the result of 2 years of careful analysis of Void Swarm remains recovered from battlefields. While the aliens had focused on studying the creature's adaptive armor and regenerative capabilities, humanity had asked a simpler question. What would happen if you delivered enough kinetic energy to completely bypass those defenses? The answer had required some creative engineering, but the principle remained elegantly simple. Captain, the Void Swarm is accelerating, Dr. Patel announced. They're moving to engage the defensive fleet. Speed is increasing beyond what we've seen in previous encounters. On the tactical display, the cloud of hostile contacts began moving toward the alien defensive formation like a swarm of predatory insects. Rodriguez watched the dance begin, knowing how it would end. The aliens would fight bravely, using weapons that could crack moons and shields that could deflect stellar radiation. But the Void Swarm would adapt, overcome, and consume. Unless humanity had correctly identified the one weakness that everyone else had missed. Take us in, Lieutenant Shun, Rodriguez ordered. Approach Vector Alpha 7. Keep us below their sensor threshold until we reach optimal range. Aye, Captain. Estimated time to engagement range is 23 minutes. Rodriguez settled back in her command chair, watching the first energy exchanges begin between the defensive fleet and the approaching swarm. Beautiful streams of coherent light and exotic particles painted deadly patterns across space, while the Void Swarm vessels began their terrifying transformation process, adapting to each new type of attack within minutes. She smiled grimly. In 23 minutes, the universe was about to learn that humans had brought something to the fight that no one expected, the ancient art of applied physics, delivered with overwhelming prejudice. The real war was about to begin. The first phase of the battle unfolded exactly as Captain Rodriguez had predicted. The Galactic Defense Council's magnificent fleet engaged the Void Swarm with every advanced weapon in their arsenal, creating a light show visible across several star systems. Plasma cannons that could melt asteroids, quantum disruptors that unravel matter at the molecular level, and reality-bending dimensional weapons all focused their fury on the approaching biomechanical horrors. For the first 10 minutes, it looked like the aliens might actually win. Several Void Swarm vessels exploded in brilliant cascades of exotic matter, their adaptive armor overwhelmed by the sheer variety of attacks. The defensive fleet's commanders began transmitting what sounded like victory chants in their various languages. Then, the adaptation protocols kicked in. Dr. Patel watched his sensors with growing alarm as the Void Swarm vessels began changing before his eyes. Their hulls rippled and flowed like living tissue, reforming into configurations that deflected plasma streams harmlessly into space. Quantum fields that had torn through their armor minutes earlier now passed through the creatures without effect. "My God," whispered Ensign Kim, watching the tactical display. "They're not just adapting to the weapons. They're learning from each other." She was right. The Void Swarm operated as a collective intelligence, sharing adaptation data instantaneously across their entire formation. Within 15 minutes of the engagement beginning, the alien fleet's most devastating weapons had become completely ineffective. The beautiful energy streams that had seemed so powerful now splashed uselessly against hulls that had restructured themselves into perfect defensive configurations. Admiral Zephyr's voice cut through the communication channels, translated fury evident in every syllable. All ships, switch to secondary weapon systems. Initiate adaptive frequency rotation protocols. But it was too late. The Void Swarm had moved from defensive adaptation to active assault. Massive bioships began launching clouds of smaller organisms that swarmed over the alien vessels like antibodies attacking an infection. These creatures burrowed through hulls that had withstood stellar radiation, their molecular acid dissolving exotic materials as easily as water dissolving salt. One by one, the magnificent alien warships began to die. Rodriguez watched the slaughter with professional detachment, her mind cataloging every detail for the action about to begin. The TDI-001 had approached to within optimal range while the aliens held the Void Swarm's attention, positioning itself above the plane of battle where the creature's adaptive sensors were focused on the main engagement. Range to primary target? She asked. 47,000 kilometers to the Queen-class bioship, replied Chief Martinez. Well within optimal parameters for the special packages. Targeting solution locked, added Dr. Patel. The creature is maintaining a steady course while directing the smaller vessels. It appears to consider itself beyond threat range. Rodriguez allowed herself a predatory smile. The Queen-class bioship was massive, over 15 kilometers in length, its hull a grotesque fusion of organic tissue and biomechanical technology. It served as the command nexus for the entire swarm, coordinating their collective adaptation protocols. Every previous engagement had shown that destroying the Queen was the key to disrupting Void Swarm operations. Unfortunately, every previous attempt to kill a Queen had failed. The creatures were protected by smaller vessels, surrounded by defensive fields, and capable of regenerating damage faster than conventional weapons could inflict it. The largest Queen encountered previously had absorbed the concentrated fire of an entire fleet for 4 hours before finally withdrawing, apparently unharmed. This Queen was twice that size. All hands, prepare for engagement, Rodriguez announced. Chief Martinez, load Special Package Alpha. Single shot, maximum velocity. Aye, Captain. Loading Special Package Alpha. The special package was Dr. Yamamoto's masterpiece, the result of 2 years spent studying a simple question. If the Void Swarm could adapt to any form of energy weapon, what would happen if you didn't use energy at all? The answer was elegant in its simplicity. Instead of trying to burn, melt, or disintegrate the target, you simply hit it hard enough to convert its own mass into energy. The projectile was a solid tungsten rod, 3 meters long and 20 centimeters in diameter, wrapped in a guidance system so primitive that it used mechanical gyroscopes and chemical thrusters. No electronics that could be jammed, no energy signatures that could be detected, no exotic physics that could be adapted to. Just 30 tons of the densest stable metal humanity could refine, accelerated to 15% of light speed. At that velocity, the tungsten rod carried more kinetic energy than most stellar weapons. When it struck its target, the laws of physics would take over, converting the projectile's momentum into heat and pressure that would make a nuclear explosion seem gentle by comparison. Targeting confirmed, Dr. Patel announced. The Queen is maintaining course and speed. No indication they've detected our presence. Fire, Rodriguez ordered. The magnetic acceleration system engaged with a deep thrumming that resonated through the ship's hull. In the space of 3 seconds, the tungsten rod was accelerated from rest to 45,000 kilometers per second, launched from the TDI-01 with such force that the ship's inertial dampeners were pushed to their limits. The projectile streaked across space, invisible to conventional sensors, too fast for most defensive systems to track, and too simple for the Void Swarm's adaptation protocols to recognize as a threat. It covered the distance to its target in less than a second. The tungsten rod struck the Queen-class bioship with the force of a small asteroid impact. The creature's adaptive armor, designed to disperse energy weapons and deflect exotic particles, offered no protection against 30 tons of metal moving at relativistic speeds. The projectile punched through the Queen's hull like it was made of paper, carrying its devastating kinetic energy deep into the creature's core before the laws of physics converted momentum into an explosion that could be seen from the outer planets. The Queen-class bioship simply disintegrated. 15 kilometers of biomechanical horror became an expanding cloud of superheated plasma in the space of milliseconds. Its death scream transmitted across every frequency as its collective intelligence network collapsed. Across the battlefield, every Void Swarm vessel stopped moving simultaneously, their coordination shattered by the sudden loss of their command nexus. Rodriguez smiled as she opened communication channels to the alien fleet. "Admiral Zephyra, this is Captain Rodriguez. The Queen is down. Recommend immediate assault on the disorganized remainder of the swarm." The response was several seconds of stunned silence before Admiral Zephyra's voice crackled through the speakers, her translation carrying overtones of awe and disbelief. "Captain, how did you? What weapon could possibly?" "Kinetic energy, Admiral," Rodriguez replied. Sometimes the old ways work best. The destruction of the Queen-class bioship had an immediate and devastating effect on the Void Swarm formation. Without their central coordinator, the remaining creatures reverted to basic survival instincts, their perfect adaptation protocols collapsing into chaotic individual responses. Ships that had seamlessly shared defensive modifications moments before now attacked each other in confused feeding frenzies. Admiral Zephyra seized the opportunity with the tactical brilliance that had earned her command of the Galactic Fleet. "All ships advance and engage. Target the largest bioforms first. They appear to be trying to establish new command hierarchies." The alien warships surged forward, their crews energized by the first real advantage they'd held since the war began. Plasma cannons and quantum disruptors found their marks against creatures that no longer adapted in perfect unison, tearing through hulls that struggled to coordinate defensive responses. But Captain Rodriguez wasn't finished. "Chief Martinez, status on remaining special packages." "We have 11 tungsten penetrators remaining, plus 40 standard kinetic rounds," the gunner reported. "All systems nominal, ready for rapid engagement." Rodriguez studied the tactical display, watching the alien fleet advance into the confused swarm. The Galactic Defense Council ships were winning, but slowly and at tremendous cost. Even disorganized, the Void Swarm creatures were individually powerful, their biological weapons still lethal to anything that came within range. "Dr. Patel, identify the largest bioforms. I want targeting solutions on anything over 5 kilometers in length." "Aye, Captain. Scanning now." Patel's fingers danced across his console. "I count 14 major bioforms attempting to establish command networks. They're positioning themselves at the edges of the battle, trying to restore coordination to the smaller vessels." "Perfect. Chief Martinez, prepare for rapid sequential firing. We're going to decapitate their entire command structure before they can adapt to our tactics." The next several minutes became a masterclass in precision warfare. The TDI-001 moved through space like a predator stalking wounded prey, positioning itself for optimal shots at the largest Void Swarm creatures. Each tungsten rod was fired with mathematical precision, the projectiles crossing vast distances in seconds to deliver their devastating payloads. The first target was a massive transport bioform that had been spawning smaller attack creatures. The tungsten rod punched through its spawning chambers and detonated deep in its core, triggering a chain reaction that consumed the creature from within. Thousands of unborn spawn died with their parent, eliminating an entire generation of potential threats. The second target was attempting to establish a communication link with scattered swarm elements. The kinetic impact severed its bioneural networks and sent shockwaves through its extended sensory organs, leaving it blind and deaf as secondary explosions tore it apart. One by one, the command bioforms died, each death throwing more of the swarm into confusion. The alien fleet pressed their advantage, but they were too far away to understand what was happening. From their perspective, the Void Swarm was simply collapsing for unknown reasons. Only Admiral Zephyra seemed to grasp the truth. Her voice cut through the battle communications with a mix of awe and growing respect. "Captain Rodriguez, our sensors are detecting massive energy releases at extreme range. Are you engaging multiple targets simultaneously?" "Confirmed, Admiral. We're eliminating their command structure to prevent reorganization." "With what weapons?" "Our best scientists cannot detect any energy signatures from your vessel." Rodriguez paused, considering how to explain kinetic warfare to beings who had forgotten that physics was often more powerful than technology. "We're using gravity and momentum, Admiral, the same forces that move planets and stars." The explanation clearly didn't satisfy the alien commander, but she was too professional to demand details during active combat. Instead, she focused on coordination. "Whatever you're doing, it's working. The swarm formations are breaking apart. We're detecting retreat patterns from the smaller vessels." That was when Dr. Patel made a disturbing discovery. "Captain, I'm picking up massive gravitational distortions at the edge of the system. Something big is coming through hyperspace." Rodriguez felt her blood run cold. "How big?" "Approximately 50 kilometers in length, with a mass greater than some moons. It's another queen, but larger than anything in our database. This one appears to be ancient, heavily augmented with technology we've never seen before." The tactical display updated, showing a contact that dwarfed everything else in the system. As they watched, the massive bioform began launching clouds of smaller vessels, each one the size of the creatures they had been fighting. Worse, these new arrivals showed no signs of the confusion that had affected the original swarm. They moved with purpose and coordination that suggested a different type of collective intelligence. "Admiral Zephyra, are you detecting the new contact?" Rodriguez transmitted. "Confirmed, Captain. Our xenobiologists are analyzing the readings. This appears to be what they call an elder queen, possibly centuries old. We have no records of successfully engaging one of these creatures." Rodriguez studied the approaching nightmare, her mind racing through tactical options. The standard tungsten penetrators had been devastating against the smaller queens, but this creature was 3 times larger, with hull configurations that suggested millennia of accumulated adaptations. Worse, it seemed to be learning from the fate of its predecessor, deploying defensive screens and escort formations that would make targeting extremely difficult. "Chief Martinez, do we have any of Dr. Yamamoto's experimental rounds?" The gunner checked his manifest. "One prototype kinetic package, designation Omega. Dr. Yamamoto specifically requested that it only be used in extreme circumstances." The yield calculations were unprecedented. Rodriguez looked at the tactical display, where the Elder Queen continued to deploy an army that would dwarf the original Void Swarm. The alien fleet was already showing signs of exhaustion, their energy reserves depleted by the extended battle. If this new threat reached the defensive line, it would be a massacre. "I'd call this an extreme circumstance. Load the Omega package." "Captain," Dr. Patel said quietly, "the prototype round is completely untested. Dr. Yamamoto's theoretical models suggest it could create gravitational effects we don't fully understand. And if we don't use it, that thing will kill every ship in this system and move on to the next one," Rodriguez replied. "Sometimes you have to choose between unknown risks and certain death." She opened a channel to the alien fleet. "Admiral Zephyra, I need your ships to fall back to minimum safe distance. We're about to deploy an experimental weapon." "Captain, we cannot abandon the defensive line. If that creature breaks through Dash, Admiral, trust me. Fall back now." There was a long pause before Zephyr responded. "All ships, withdraw to 50,000 kilometers. The human vessel is deploying unknown weapons. As the alien fleet began its retreat, Rodriguez stared at the approaching Elder Queen, knowing that humanity's fate might depend on a single experimental round designed by a physicist who freely admitted he wasn't entirely sure what would happen when it was fired. The ultimate test was about to begin. Dr. Yamamoto's Omega package was less a weapon than it was an experiment in applied physics that pushed the boundaries of what kinetic energy could accomplish. Instead of a simple tungsten rod, the Omega round contained a dense core of collapsed matter surrounded by a carefully designed implosion system. When fired at relativistic speeds, the projectile would compress itself just before impact, creating a brief but incredibly intense gravitational field that would tear apart molecular bonds through tidal forces alone. The theoretical calculations had been impressive. The practical results remained completely unknown. Captain Rodriguez watched the Elder Queen approach, its massive bulk distorting local space-time as escort vessels swarmed around it like antibodies protecting a vast organism. The creature had learned from observing the deaths of the smaller queens, deploying defensive screens and adaptive armor that shifted continuously, never presenting the same configuration twice. Range to target, Rodriguez asked, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were about to attempt. 87,000 kilometers and closing, reported Dr. Patel. The creature is accelerating. Projected intercept with the alien fleet in 14 minutes. Targeting solution locked on the creature's core mass, added Chief Martinez. The Omega package is loaded and ready. Captain, I should mention that Dr. Yamamoto's final notes recommended a minimum safe distance of 100,000 kilometers for the firing vessel. Rodriguez glanced at the tactical display. They were well within that range, and the Elder Queen was closing fast. If they moved to safe distance, they would lose the optimal firing solution, and the creature's defensive screens would make a successful hit nearly impossible. We'll take our chances, Chief. The galaxy is counting on this shot. Admiral Zephyr's voice crackled through the communication system. Captain Rodriguez, our long-range sensors are detecting additional hyperspace distortions throughout the sector. It appears this Elder Queen is summoning reinforcements from multiple systems. If it reaches our defensive line, it will coordinate a multi-system assault that could overwhelm our remaining fleets. The stakes had just escalated beyond a single system. Rodriguez realized they weren't just fighting for Tau Ceti, but potentially for the survival of galactic civilization itself. The Void Swarm had been probing individual systems, testing defenses and adaptation capabilities. Now, they were preparing for a coordinated campaign that would sweep across inhabited space like a plague. Understood, Admiral. Preparing to engage. She turned to her crew, these 12 humans who had volunteered to test humanity's most dangerous experiment in the ultimate crucible of combat. All hands, prepare for Omega deployment. If the theoretical models are correct, we're about to see something that's never been done before. If they're wrong, she didn't finish the sentence. Everyone understood the implications. Firing solution confirmed, Dr. Patel announced. The creature is maintaining course toward the alien fleet. Defensive screens are rotating, but I've identified a window in their coverage that should occur in approximately 30 seconds. Chief Martinez, prepare to fire on my mark. The Omega package was loaded into the primary magnetic acceleration system. Its exotic matter core, contained within gravitational fields that humanity had only recently learned to manipulate. The implosion mechanism was armed, ready to trigger compression sequences that would occur in the microseconds before impact. Window opening in 5, 4, 3, 2 mark. Firing Omega package. The magnetic acceleration system engaged with a sound like reality tearing. The Omega round accelerated down the launch tube, gaining velocity at rates that pushed the ship's systems beyond their design limits. Warning alarms screamed as the massive energy draw caused fluctuations throughout the vessel, but the round achieved target velocity and launched toward its destination. Rodriguez held her breath as the projectile streaked across space, a mote of compressed matter moving at nearly 20% of light speed. The Elder Queen's defensive screens flickered and shifted, but the timing was perfect. The round slipped through a gap in the creature's protection just as the implosion system activated. What happened next redefined everyone's understanding of kinetic warfare. The Omega round didn't simply punch through the Elder Queen's hull. Instead, its compressed matter core created a localized gravitational anomaly that reached out with invisible fingers to grab the creature's own mass and use it as a weapon against itself. Molecular bonds snapped under impossible tidal stresses. The Queen's adaptive armor, evolved over millennia to deflect energy weapons, offered no protection against forces that twisted space-time itself. The Elder Queen began to collapse inward, its 50-kilometer bulk compressing as if squeezed by an invisible fist. For a moment that lasted eternity, the creature fought against physical laws that could not be adapted to or overcome. Then, the gravitational field destabilized, releasing all that compressed energy in an explosion that briefly outshone the local star. The blast wave expanded outward, vaporizing the Queen's escort vessels and creating gravitational ripples that could be detected from neighboring systems. When the energy finally dissipated, nothing remained but cooling plasma and the slowly expanding debris of what had once been the most powerful creature in Void Swarm history. But the effects went far beyond simple destruction. The Elder Queen's death sent psychic shockwaves through the collective consciousness of every Void Swarm creature in the sector. The hyperspace distortions that had been building as reinforcements prepared to arrive suddenly collapsed as the surviving queens retreated in what could only be described as terror. Dr. Patel stared at his readings in amazement. "Captain, I'm detecting massive hyperspace signatures throughout the sector, but they're all moving away from inhabited systems. It appears the entire Void Swarm is withdrawing." Admiral Zephyra's voice carried tones of awe that the translation system struggled to convey. "Captain Rodriguez, our strategic sensors confirm a general retreat across 17 star systems. Whatever you did to that creature, it appears to have broken their collective will to continue the assault." Rodriguez slumped in her command chair, suddenly feeling the weight of exhaustion as adrenaline faded. "We gave them something they couldn't adapt to, Admiral. Fear. The battle was over, but its consequences would reshape galactic civilization. Humanity had proven that sometimes the most primitive approaches could solve problems that defeated advanced technology. More importantly, they had demonstrated that thinking differently about warfare could produce results that no one expected. In the months that followed, human kinetic weapons would be reverse-engineered and adapted by species across the galaxy. The principles of applied physics that humanity had never abandoned would become the foundation for new defensive strategies. Most importantly, the Void Swarm would never again approach inhabited systems with the confidence they had once possessed. The prototype had been laughed at, dismissed as primitive and useless. But when conventional wisdom failed, humanity's refusal to abandon simple solutions had saved the galaxy itself. Sometimes the most powerful weapon was the one nobody saw coming. The sledgehammer had lived up to its name, proving that when you can't finesse a problem, sometimes you just need to hit it harder than anyone thought possible. The stars themselves had learned to respect the ingenuity of a species that turned physics into poetry and momentum into victory.